Good evening and welcome back to the show. If you just recently tuned in tonight, I'm here on the set with the EU Ambassador to the Pacific, Ambassador Sujiro, and the Director of, from the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, Director Zarak. Welcome again to the show, gentlemen. Now, Director Khan, what were some of the challenges that you faced while working on the Spirit project?
I think I would probably describe it as a challenge, but also an opportunity, in the sense that when working with a development partner like the European Union, you have a number of requirements when it comes to applying for development funding. And so, for example, entities that receive EU funding needs to be pillar assessed. And that requirement allows us to strengthen our own systems, for example, work hand in hand with the European Union, and also work with our member states. And a project of this nature, which is quite large, you're talking about $14.3 million in funding over a 4-year period, requires a lot of consultations with our member states as well. So we definitely wanted it to be a demand-driven approach and ensure that the priorities that are articulated in the Spirit project reflect the needs of our member states on the ground. So it took a number of years to get to where we are, but we're very proud of what we've managed to accomplish with the EU delegation.
Now, I understand that a lot of economies right now, not just here in this region, but across the world, are struggling post-COVID and during COVID with economic recovery. How timely is this project for the region?
I think COVID-19 has had a disastrous impact, a catastrophic impact in the Pacific region. We had the Forum Economic Ministers meet in August last year, and they issued a declaration, particularly highlighting where the most areas of need are, and trade was identified as one of them. If you look at an economy like Fiji, which is projected to contract by close to 20% because of the loss of tourism income, trade can be an essential platform to recovery. And so what we're hoping to do this year is support countries' recovery, but more importantly, help them build resilience through a project like Spirit, so that when future pandemics and shocks of this nature arise, they're much better prepared to try and respond to that.
Thank you for that, Director Khan. Now, Ambassador Sim, the EU's trade relationship with the Pacific states is set by the Economic Partnership Agreement. The new trade project that was signed last week will facilitate the implementation of trade agreements, in particular the Economic Partnership Agreement, and of the Pacific's Aid for Trade Strategy 2020 to 2025. What is the Economic Partnership Agreement, and what does it include for those who might still not know? I understand that Papua New Guinea ratified in 2011 and Fiji ratified that agreement in 2014.
Well, the economic partnership agreements are the main instruments to allow Pacific Island countries and their exporters to access the European market. This is the single largest free market in the world, with 500 million consumers with a very high income. So this is, I think, the best export market in the whole world. In the economic partnership agreements, what we offered to the Pacific Island countries is a duty-free and quota-free access, which is to say an unrestricted access. Is the most preferential regime you can think of in international trade. On the other hand, access to Pacific Island countries, because we recognize their fragility, because of remoteness, size, and difficulty in accessibility, will be only progressively liberalized. Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned the countries which decided to go into the economic partnership agreements, because we started with the largest economies in the Pacific, Papua New Guinea and Fiji, and then Samoa and Solomon Island. But now we have very advanced talks with Tonga, an expression of interest from Kiribati, but also Tuvalu and Vanuatu. So this is not an instrument only for the big countries of the Pacific, but it's really an instrument for everyone, and everyone can take advantage of trade. Let me give you a concrete example of the advantages the economic partnership agreements give. For example, you know that fisheries products in the Pacific are certainly one of the main areas for the generation of income for Pacific Island countries. With the economic partnership agreements, we can have what we call the global sourcing, which means that any fish which is caught anywhere in the Pacific, as long as it is exported from one of the countries of the Pacific, is labeled as an export from that country. That's a very significant change, because otherwise the fish caught outside of the economic exclusive zone will not qualify as export of that country and will not enjoy the duty-free and quota-free access.
Wow, that's great to hear, Ambassador. Now, what are some key challenges in implementing the EPA?
I think in implementing the EPA, one of the key challenges is that on paper, we offer duty-free and quota-free access. It doesn't guarantee that the countries of the Pacific have the value chains, have the sectors with the high quality that is required in Europe to export the products. So it's only a theoretical offer. If we do not go into a program such as the Spirit program to strengthen intra-regional and international trade in the Pacific, to allow the countries in the Pacific to identify and support and develop value chains and increase aid for trade and provide trade advisors and strengthen the capacity of the trade bodies in the Pacific, to really make the most, in concrete terms, of the advantages offered by the economic partnership agreements in Europe.
So it looks like the Pacific Island countries have a lot of work to do in order to qualify for these advantages that comes with the agreement. Now, Director Khan, how did you manage to address some of the challenges that were highlighted by Ambassador Sim?
Sure, thank you. I'm just building on the point that the Ambassador raised. So Spirit is part of a broader EU project called PRIZE, which is a 37 million euro project for the Pacific region. And so under PRIZE, Spirit is one of the key components. So you're looking at trade agreements and aid for trade. But as the Ambassador was highlighting, you cannot treat trade in isolation. So it goes hand in hand, ensuring we can improve the business environments in a lot of these Pacific Island countries. We can strengthen their capacity when it comes to sanitary and phytosanitary issues, biosecurity issues, customs and trade facilitation, and most importantly, ensuring that we're supporting the private sector development in the Pacific Island countries. So the Spirit project will work hand in hand with the other implementing partners who are responsible for the other components, and ensuring that we can have a holistic approach towards addressing these challenges.
Apart from trip advisors, that will be one of the key areas that will be considered with the Spirit project, what other areas are you looking into as well?
So as you mentioned, trade advisors going out into the different sub-regions would be a very critical instrument for us. I think a lot of people are not aware that for some of our member countries, their trade departments comprise of just 1 or 2 people. And so to run an entire trade program in a country requires a lot more resources. And so through the help of the EU, these trade advisors will be there to provide capacity supplementation to ensure that these countries are able to adequately implement the EPA, also able to adequately implement the Pacific Aid for Trade strategy, and a lot of other areas that we are looking at. And so it's just one component of a broad suite of measures that we're looking at.
Thank you for that, Director Khan. Stay with us, we've got more coming up after the break.